Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. It is great to have a new guest today, the skeptical fish. Hello, fish.
Hey, Granny, how's it going?
Great. How are you doing?
Oh, not bad. It's beautiful weather outside, so I was enjoying the morning, just being out and having a good time on a Saturday.
Okay. Are you able to get out? I mean, do you live in a pond or do you live in an aquarium or?
Yeah, I'm a lungfish, so I could actually
Ah,
get out. So
okay. Do you know my history with lungfish?
I do not know your history with lungfish.
Okay.
Sounds interesting.
Lungfish are what broke young Earth creationism for me.
Ah,
I used to be a young Earth creationist, and the young Earth creationists made the terrible mistake of making a falsifiable claim. And that claim was that fish cannot grow lungs and climb out of the water. And then I went to the Shed Aquarium, and there they were right in front of me,
yep,
lungfish, fish with
yep.
lungs. And I went, oh, the young Earthers lied.
Hey! I was a young Earth creationist at one time too, so don't
Oh,
feel too
cool.
bad. Yeah, I was actually a charter member of the Creation Museum. I gave Ken Ham money before he built the thing, and I feel really, really
Really?
bad about that. Yeah, yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
I had my
Um,
name on a plaque there. I hope they took it down by now, but
if they have it, you could always ask them to.
I did. I sent them an email and
Oh.
asked them if they would take it down if it's still up.
Mark Caesar says Gigi reels in another great guest.
I hope so. I'm waiting for him. When is he going to start?
Mark Caesar?
No, the great guest that you invited.
Ah, oh, sorry, I missed the joke. It's you, of course. Okay, I
Wow.
have a question for you, which I got from Mark Caesar,
Hmm.
which is, are you the cod of the gaps?
Ooh, that's a tough question, right? And they say a year is like 1,000 fish or something like that, or to God, or the cod, the great cod. Yeah, I fill in all the gaps that the other cods don't fill in because
Ah.
yeah. So I kind of make up for all the unknown fish things. Like, why is there lungfish? Because me, you know.
Uh, the Spaghettius says, I don't know the guest yet. I hope he gets introduced. Okay, let me tell you a little bit more about my guest. My guest is one of my patrons. And when he told me just a little bit about himself, I thought he sounded like he would make a great guest for this show. But unfortunately, he is not in a position where he can reveal his name or his face. He is a fairly recent convert to atheism and does not feel comfortable yet revealing personal information. So for now, he is the skeptical fish. And if you ever want to have another conversation with the skeptical fish, his Twitter handle, which is also skeptical fish, is in the description, and you can reach him there to get to know him a little bit better.
I kind of
Um,
just troll. I troll a lot of your creationists and stuff like that on Twitter. That's kind of just trolling.
okay.
You won't get anything deep from my Twitter account. Just a bunch of go into these creationists and stuff. All this stuff I used to believe, and I like to just kind of troll them.
Mhm, mhm. For me, John Piper is one of the people that I really like to troll, and for the same reason. My pastor practically worshiped John Piper, and, I was the church librarian, so of course, I got all of John Piper's books for the library, and I've read most of John Piper's books. I own a good number of Piper's books, and so, yeah, John Piper is definitely one of the ones that I go after for that reason.
Have you seen his son on TikTok?
I have, yes.
He's
I
pretty
I
cool.
don't.
He's
Mhm. And, that's one of the things that I find difficult to understand now with Calvinism, because the Calvinists say that only the elect are saved, the unelect are not saved, and this was determined by God before creation. And yet, when Abraham, Piper's son, made the decision to leave the faith, Piper went to his board and said, "Am I still allowed to be a pastor? Because one of my children is not following God. Does that disqualify me from the pastorate?" And I'm going, wait a minute. Your theology says that if they're not called, they're not going to be a believer. So maybe God just didn't call your son. How would it disqualify you from the pastorate if God chose not to call your son? It just defies reason the way that they kind of turn their theology on and off when it suits, well,
We
really suits them, because this didn't really suit him, but yeah, they don't seem to think through the theological implications of the question.
well, they interpret some of the scriptures from the Pauline epistles where it talks about qualifications to be a
Mhm.
elder and everything. They interpret some of those meaning like if you can't keep a good family uh, home, how can you keep a congregation
A
or whatever? So they'll
congregation, yeah, right, exactly.
that's what he's probably he's being fundamentalist like that. Most of them interpret that as like, hey, if you can't keep your house straight, you can't keep God's house straight. I've
Oh,
heard
yeah.
that before.
Yeah, yeah, I knew that's exactly where he was going with it, but it's still it just doesn't fit their theology that that would be a qualification, because it's
Yeah,
something that was in God's hands alone. You know,
I
how
was a
can you
Calvinist too.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, I was a big Johnny Mac, John MacArthur fan. So
Ah, ah,
yeah, I was
okay.
the worst of worst worlds. Yeah.
Did you hear MacArthur's, blunder today?
Not today. I've heard a bunch of them, but not
Oh,
today's.
yeah,
There's what
yeah.
happened today.
I saw a short video posted. It was MacArthur was trending because he made the claim that all people are either XX or XY. There is no other gender.
He doesn't understand science.
No, he doesn't understand science. He doesn't understand the difference between gender and sex. Yeah, he. I had my brother on to refute him once over a science issue because it dealt with the vaccine. And he was making claims about the vaccine that were clearly anti-science. And since my brother is a pharmacist and was well versed in how the vaccines were made, I had him come on and talk about all the things that MacArthur was getting wrong about the vaccine.
Yeah, during COVID, they were really big about fighting California. Because California wanted the churches to close down because that's how you got a pandemic going around, and the easiest way to transmit it is have a whole bunch of people in a small area. And
Mhm.
he made like national news, didn't he, trying to keep his church open and everything.
He did, and he sued and he won the right to keep his church open, and I tried to keep track of the figures to tell how much of an impact his church being open had on COVID, but unfortunately, he's in Los Angeles, and
Yeah,
because the population is so big, even though he has a mega church, his population isn't big enough to be able to determine what effect his church had on COVID in Los Angeles.
yeah. And the rumor was he had caught COVID because he had went underground for a time during the pandemic.
Yeah, I heard that too, but it was never verified.
He was never going to admit it, right?
Right. Not accepted says that one of the problems with creatures is that they live in shallow waters.
Boom.
And Mark Caesar says, "Well, I can prove him wrong on that firsthand. I'm XXY."
Yep. Yeah, that's one of the things that along with my journey, having been like very fundamentalist, very evangelical, taking the Bible literally and everything. So you think that like I'm right because the Bible says I'm right, kind of thing. And
Mhm.
one of the things that had to change, that did change once I was able to get free of that fundamentalism, even before I completely became an atheist, but when I was still kind of religious but non-fundamentalist religious, is I started becoming open to the idea of like, hey, things like homosexuality, which you're always taught, it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong, it's against God's word. I started reevaluating my morals and ideals on things, and I didn't have this dogma holding me down anymore. And I started thinking, like seriously thinking about stuff like that, and thinking about transgender and the different, all these different things that you weren't allowed to think about
Right.
in fundamentalist. Now I could think about it. I was like, well, why are we worried? Why are evangelicals worried about everybody else and what they do and what they do in their free time and who they marry and all that? I mean, what's the big deal? So
Hmm.
it kind of opened my mind to things that I wasn't allowed to, roads I wasn't allowed to go down, because it'd be a sin, right, if you question the Bible.
I'm going to bring up a couple comments that I skipped over earlier, but I thought were interesting. Ring says Tiktaalik got me out of Young Earth. And I'm guessing that Tiktaalik is kind of along the same lines, and I'll bring more about
Yeah,
that when I have him on as a guest in 2 weeks. Ring will be here in 2 weeks. And Ring also
nice.
says, I put Ken Ham on the dedication page of a book I wrote for a school project. That sounds interesting, like an interesting topic for conversation as well.
That's probably not something Ken Ham would be proud of.
Yeah. Oh, and Aunt Jer says, are you sure you're trolling or are you trawling?
Is this going to be all dad jokes, or
It's going to be all fish jokes, of course.
the fish, the reason I call myself my troll account is the skeptical fish. Of course, the skeptical part is obvious. Everybody's skeptical something, right? In the atheist
Mm-hmm.
world. But
Mm-hmm.
the fish part is, I love aquariums. I'm kind of like an amateur
Mm.
aquarist. I got several aquariums of fish, and so I'm like, okay, if I got to come up with an account, I'm going to make me a Twitter account, and I don't want people to know that I'm trolling all these people and everything, because to me it's kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, I want something that kind of reflects my personality. And then the skeptical part was a no brainer. You're either going to be skeptical or godless, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the fish, I was like, fish, because I love aquariums. Like I said, I got angelfish, I got guppies, I got Corodora catfish, I got shrimp, I got all kinds of stuff, cherry shrimp. So, I'm an amateur aquarist. Or how do you pronounce that?
I'm not
I don't
sure how
know.
you pronounce it, but I definitely have questions for you
Uh-oh.
because, well, when I lived in Fort Wayne, Indiana, we had a nice saltwater tank.
Hmm.
And I wanted a saltwater tank because I really wanted a Royal Grandma. And I assumed that you couldn't buy a Royal Grandma. I assumed they were somehow endangered or something. No, you can go to the pet store and get a Royal Grandma. So we did. We got a Royal Grandma and we got a couple of blue tangs. And I had a decent tank, but I could never keep it clean.
Hmm.
There was always algae in the tank, and people said, "Oh, try snails," and that didn't work. And I would empty that thing and clean it and refill it, every once in a while. Well, actually, about every 2 weeks, but it was always dirty. How do you keep the algae off the glass?
Well, there's different types of algae. There's what's called gray beard, dark algae, and then there's the green kind, that you commonly see that grow on the sides of stuff. And it depends on the type of algae. Like the regular green algae,
Hmm.
if you get now, salt water is not my thing. It's a little bit different, but I'm a freshwater person. But a lot of things you can do in a freshwater tank is keep your nitrates low, which that's a story in of itself, what nitrates are in the water. You can take it and you can tell how much nitrogen's in the water. It's called the nitrogen cycle. But plants feed off the nitrates, and
Hmm.
algae is a plant. So if you got a lot of nitrates in your water, the algae will spread sometimes. So if you've got a lot of plants will eat the nitrate, or water changes
Mm.
will keep the nitrate low, so the algae doesn't. And also limit your light. If you got your
Okay.
aquarium in front of a window and it's getting light all the time, that's going to make the algae grow too. So there's a lot of little things like that you can do.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Okay. We need to keep Harmonica Man at a distance
Uh
because he
oh.
says I'm a fish fry enthusiast. Harmonica
Ooh.
Man, we are not going to allow you to fry the guest.
Mm-mm. No burning at the stake.
That's right. Okay. So, what part of the country are you in?
I'm in the southeast. If you couldn't tell by my accent, I'm
Well,
actually
I was mostly curious because you mentioned being a charter member of Ken Ham's museum, so I was wondering if you lived in Kentucky.
no.
No.
I live in
Okay.
I live in Alabama.
Oh, you
I'm your
do?
neighbor. I'm your
Oh,
neighbor,
how
and you
about
didn't even
that?
know
Yeah,
that.
because no, I did not know that. Yeah, I live in
Uh,
Alabama also.
I
Well,
don't
I'll
live in
have to.
North Alabama. I live in Central Alabama,
Okay. Okay.
around Montgomery.
Okay. Okay. My son drives right through there every time he goes to and from school. He goes to school at Auburn.
Ah, yeah, Auburn,
S-
boo,
So
roll tide.
you
Gonna
can
start a
see
war now, ain't
the War Eagle, yeah. But you can see I'm
well,
wearing an Auburn shirt.
my wife is an Auburn fan. I know the non-Alabama people won't understand why this is a big
Mhm,
deal, but here it is. My wife's an Auburn fan, and I'm an Alabama fan. And the kids, we both competed who was going to convert the kids as they were growing up. And for a while, they would be Auburn. For a while, they'd be in Alabama. But at the end of the day, I won. They're Alabama fans, and I think it kind of helped that Alabama wins a bunch of national championships because everybody likes a
mhm,
winner, right?
mhm. That's for sure. Um, BS Not Accepted asked, "Can you comment on Noah's flood and fish in salt water and fresh water?"
See, that's really interesting, isn't it? That
Mhm,
the whole because if you deal with aquarium fish, they're very sensitive. Most of them are very sensitive to salinity in water and even like different how hard or soft water is, right? It's really
mhm,
easy to kill fish. It's really easy to kill fish. So if you had a big huge like Ken Ham describes it, where there's mass hysteria and all this water is mixing and all that, the fish ain't gonna survive that.
no,
It's
no.
not gonna happen. So that's always, I never thought of that when I was a young Earth creationist. But when I started taking care of fish later, I was like, you know what, that is kind of crazy. How did the fish survive?
Mhm,
Because
mhm.
it's easy to kill fish. Trust me.
Well, not only that, Ken Ham claims that the insects survived off boat as well, that they were not on the ark, that they
Yep,
were
because
floating on mats of vegetation, right?
yeah.
But one of the things that they fail to take into account is they also have the continents racing around to get from the Pangea to their current location all in 1 year.
Hmm.
And this is creating tsunamis that are up to 100 feet high. How are these mats of vegetation not being flipped over and the insects being killed? Not to mention the fact that the fish are being thrown around so badly that most of them would die as well.
It's a miracle, right? But the one that I never knew about till later, when I really opened my mind up to start like being skeptical about these stories, was you're familiar with Gut Sick Gibbon, right?
Mhm.
And
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Most of what I know
she
about primatology, I know from her.
well, she brought up in one of her shows, she brought up, she had some people who knew it because it's not her specialty, but the heat problem.
Mhm.
All
Mhm.
the heat, and I never thought about that. It's like, gosh, that would generate a lot of heat. I didn't know the numbers until she had one of her friends like calculate the numbers and everything. Like, oh my God, you would boil the earth. It would be like a molten ball of like lava if
Well,
that really
you're
happened.
right. Right. Right.
Yeah. So it's a miracle.
Mhm. Mark Caesar says, "Come on, Gigi. Common sense has no place in religion." Okay, so let's get to the story of how you got to be where you are. You were a fundamentalist.
Hmm.
Were you living in Alabama at that time?
Yes, I've always lived here. And here's
Oh,
the interesting
okay.
thing. I wasn't raised a fundamentalist. I was raised, being in Alabama, everybody's a Christian, right?
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
was what we would call a cultural Christian. We went to church on Sundays and Wednesdays, and the rest of the week, I didn't really even understand any type of theology. I didn't even know, even until I was in my 20s, that Christianity taught that Jesus was God. But I
Oh,
knew that,
really?
yeah, but I knew the Bible was true because you're told that for your whole life, and I knew that. God, bad people went to hell, good people went to heaven. And I had no theological background as far as understanding scripture. It was just strictly cultural Christians. We didn't pray at home or anything. We went to church every Sunday, though, and we went to church every Wednesday. So, but then in the early 2000s, as an adult in my late 20s, I was introduced by a guy. I started a new job, and a guy I worked with introduced me to a thing called Hell's Best Kept Secrets. You familiar with that? It's Ray Comfort.
No, I'm
And
not.
Lies in the Textbooks, which is Kit Hovind.
Okay.
So I was introduced to those two things, and I'm like, well, this is interesting. And everybody knows Ray Comfort's the Banana Man and everything. When I heard Best Kept Secrets, it made sense on not a logical sense, but kind of because I didn't understand what the Bible taught anyway. And I'm like, oh, okay, so that's what all that is about. So, I didn't understand Jesus dying for sins, and I really had no concept of any of that. And so I got pulled into this fundamentalist kind of group and people, and don't get me wrong, the guy, I'm still friends with him today that introduced me to all this. He's a really nice guy, but he was in part of that with his church and everything, and I got pulled into it. And you just kind of get sucked into this, and you were always taught that the Bible, growing up, the Bible's true, even though you didn't know what it meant. And then you start learning what it teaches, and then sometimes there's a conflict in you. It's like, oh wow, that's a really hard thing to take, some of the things the Bible teaches. But as I went, Ray Comfort is really big into open air preaching and spreading the gospel and gospel tracts and all that. He's got that Living Waters where he makes a bunch of money off of selling tracts and stuff. And I got caught up in all that, and I was going out. I was open air preaching, Granny. I was one of those annoying people that would be yelling at you and handing little pamphlets to you, telling you need to repent or you're gonna go to hell. I was one of those people, and I was using the whole Ray Comfort thing. Have you ever told a lie? So much so that when I met somebody from Living Waters, I was at a ministry thing at the Super Bowl, and I think, when was that? That was probably, it's when the Saints won the Super Bowl. I can't remember what year that was.
Okay, that would be the same year as Katrina.
Okay. Well, I don't remember. I think I wrote notes one time, but I met a guy at that Super Bowl ministry thing that was with Living Waters, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to go do the Ambassadors Academy with Ray Comfort?" I'm like, "Oh, that sounds really cool." We spend a week there at Ray's compound. Compound, it's an office building, but you spend a week there, and they teach you how to open air preach and how to witness to people and all this stuff. And I actually got sponsored. All I had to do was pay for my plane ticket to LA, and they sponsored me. They had some donors that would sponsor people to go. So I actually went free other than a plane ticket, and I spent a week there. I met Ray Comfort. He was a hero of mine at that time because he, quote unquote, saved me back, back in the early 2000s. And so I went through that whole thing, and I got my little challenge coin. They give everybody who graduates from the Ambassadors Academy a challenge coin, just like the military has them, where if you see somebody else and you challenge them, if you got your coin, if they ain't got their coin, they got to buy you a drink, kind of thing. But I did that for a while, for several years. I was out handing out tracts and open air preaching and all that, and buying my tracts from Ray Comfort, and I was really into that. I got into Reformed theology. I started studying. I was like all in God's word, man. I was studying like crazy. I got with John MacArthur and John Piper and all those guys, and R.C. Sproul, and I had like all their commentaries and their study Bibles, and I was just studying like crazy. And I just like, oh man, this is what everybody's talking about. The Bible has to be true because everybody always says it's true, and if it's true, I need to understand it. And honestly, if it is true, you need to understand it, right? You don't need to be ignorant of it. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Wayne Grudem.
Oh yeah.
I got a
Biblical manhood and womanhood. Yep, we studied that in our church.
Well, he's big in the Reformed. He's big in the Reformed group.
Mm-hmm.
And I started studying his systematic theology.
Yep.
And
I have a copy of that one too.
but this is where it began, was Wayne Grudem. Believe it or not, Wayne Grudem was the crack that started everything in my journey away from.
Interesting.
Yes, we were studying the canonization, the part of systematic theology which studies the canonization of the New Testament.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you know how we were always taught, and you know this, Granny, that the Bible's inerrant,
Mm-hmm.
infallible Word of God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even Wayne Grudem had to, I wouldn't say he doubted anything, but he's like, because you know, the Bible was never really canonized. It kind of just happened. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh, really? You mean there isn't just like God didn't lay them down and it just
And
kind of
say,
happened over
there it
hundreds of
is.
years? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it happened over hundreds of years, and then even the reformers didn't. There's some Bible. There's some Revelations was one that people doubted in the Reformation. They're like, Revelations can't be weird. That's crazy, you know. But and then when I started studying, like, there's this little bit of doubt in my mind. It's like, well, if this is the infallible, inerrant Word of God, why did it have so much trouble coming together to these 66 books? And then you
Mm-hmm.
got the Catholic Bible, of course, which is more books. And then you've got the Eastern Orthodox, which is different books. And it's like, oh my word. So there's all, you know, it isn't just something that came down from heaven right after Jesus was crucified. This is something that evolved over hundreds of years to get to where it's at today. And there was stuff that was thrown out and stuff that was kept. And I know Wayne Grudem was teaching it like God was orchestrating this and everything, but my mind was saying, this seems like a horrible way for a God to create a text. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
this doesn't make sense. And that was the first crack. And the thing you know yourself is, you said it yourself, is once you start, because fundamentalism put you in such a box that everything has to be perfect. Once a
Mm-hmm.
crack happens, everything starts falling apart, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. The whole house of cards just collapses.
And from that point forward, I started like I gotta really look into it, and I got scared, Granny. So
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm going to quit looking for a while. So for like several years, I just like I quit doing any kind of theological study because I was scared of what I saw. And but I gradually over that time quit going to church as much. I quit being, because
Mm-hmm.
I used to teach Sunday school. I quit going out. I went open air preaching. I wasn't doing, you know, all these different things. I was gradually becoming I still
A
was a
normal
Christian.
person.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, a normal person. But I still call myself a Christian, right? I still wanted to believe in God and everything, but the fundamentalism was falling apart. And,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and the thing is, this is what's so crazy. The fundamentalism is taught in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
All that stuff, all this crazy nutball stuff that fundamentalists believe, you find that in the Bible. So then the whole house of cards start falling apart. It's like, well, I'm not fundamentalist. I can't. But you know, so it just becomes this whole that you know, they call it deconstruction, right? And I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
what was going on. This is all
Right. Right.
retrospect. I'm looking
Right.
back from 2023, looking back at this is probably in 2011, 2012, when this first kind of eye-opening thing happened. And so I don't know what's going on in my mind because I'm not cognitive of it until later. But my whole worldview is like deconstructing, and it's slowly, this stuff doesn't happen overnight. And I become a normal person, like you said. I'm not as hateful anymore. I'm starting to be more accepting of stuff, but I'm still holding on to my religion. I'm still holding on to God, or the God concept. I still call myself a Christian, and I still try to go to church. When I go to church, a lot of times the messages I hear, I just doesn't resonate with me like it used to, and it's like, I don't really believe that anymore. And then you go church searching, and you jump to different churches, and you try to find more moderate churches and stuff. So there's that's 2012, and you jump ahead. All of a sudden, around 2020, when the pandemic happened, here's another one this is when I finally admitted that I was an atheist, because this over the past like 8 to 10 years, just gradually deconstructing. And I started the whole Trump thing, the way evangelicals just love Trump. I was sitting
Mm-hmm.
here still a Christian saying, how can you love this man? He's everything we said we hated. right? He's a
Mhm.
womanizer. He's this horrible person. How can and that just another like chopped away at my fundamentalist Christianity. And then we went into 2020, and I started seeing how evangelicals were just totally dismissing science. They was totally dismissing
Mhm.
mask wearing and vaccines and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, this was me in young Earth creationism. This is
Mhm.
what I looked like when I was a young Earth creationist. I looked like a moron. You know, I mean, seriously, I was doing all this retrospect on myself. I was like, oh my God, is this what people? This is what I look like to other people. This what they're, and that's when at some point during all that, I started evaluating my life. I'm like, you know what? I don't pray anymore. I don't go to church anymore. I don't do any of that stuff. I said, I don't think I'm convinced there's a God anymore. And that was like
Mm.
huge revelation to me. And that was
Mhm.
scary because, you don't want to say the atheist word because we were raised thinking that that's horrible. Those are horrible people, you know. And it took me most of 2020 being stuck at the house during the pandemic, and I really started getting into YouTube. Right, I started listening to all these different people like Vice Rhino and like Apologia really helped me a lot because I early on
Mhm.
I associated with Apologia because he feels. I know he wouldn't like this, but he feels Christian, right? Because he was there. He was a fundamentalist Christian sense. So, and when he was talking about, Ken Ham and eggs, and all that stuff, and I was like, and then I just started just getting into this atheist YouTube world, and my mind just started opening up to all these possibilities that I wouldn't allow to come in. I was scared to think about. I was scared to be skeptical because you're taught don't doubt God. If you doubt
Mhm.
God, that's sinful. So now I'm
No, I
I'm
was
like,
never told that doubting God was a sin.
you were. Were you
No.
afraid to doubt God though? That something would happen to you if you doubted?
Yes. Yes, I was. Even early as a Christian, of course, I was not raised in a Christian home. I was at a secular home, and I converted to Christianity at 16. And I always had this fear that I might stop believing, that I might not, that somehow I would fall out of this, that I would turn away from it, and I would ask other people to help keep me accountable. I don't wanna fall away from this, but, that then after a couple of years, that fear went away because I was just so into it. I was just so immersed in it that turning away from it didn't even seem possible.
Hmm. Oh, I understand. I mean, you get so caught up in it, and the fear of hell is something that haunts you. It's very traumatic. It's something that haunts you even after you deconvert, even though you know it's not real. In your
Mhm,
mind, you logically know it's not real, but it's been ingrained. Like, even when I was a what I called a cultural Christian, being in the South, you always believed in hell. Whether
mhm.
you understood Christianity or whatever, everybody said, "Oh, you're gonna go to hell," So that fear stays with you like a trauma, kind of sometimes, and sometimes you're like, "Oh my gosh," the things that it just they use that fear to control people, and I understand it now, but there's always that subconscious because it's fed to you all those years that it's kind of hard to overcome sometimes.
Mhm, mhm.
And I guess one of my biggest regrets, in a way, is I raised my kids to be evangelical Christians,
Yeah,
and
I did too.
they're adults now.
Mhm.
But I did something wrong, Granny. Somehow they became liberal Christians. Uh, they're not hateful Christians. They're not fundamentalists, which I am so thankful for. But
Mhm.
the old me would be like, "What did I do wrong? I did everything right. I sent them to Christian private school, and I made them pray every night, and I made them do this. I made them watch Ken Ham videos, Granny."
Mhm. Mhm. Actually, there was a Ken Ham video that one of my kids brought home from school because I sent my kids to Christian school as well. And I didn't know who Ken Ham was until I watched that video, and I did not like it at all because in the video, Ken Ham was telling the kids, if your teacher tells you that this happened millions of years ago, you should ask your teacher, you should raise your hand and ask, were you
Were you
there?
there? Yep. Were you
And
there? I knew that was
and I
coming.
said, that is disrespectful. And even in, if my children in a history class at a Christian school raise their hands and ask the history teacher, were you there? Just doing what Ken Ham told them to do, they'd be likely to be disciplined for being disrespectful. And so I never had any respect for Ken Ham.
Yeah, but I was all into that. Because it made sense if the Bible was true, right? If
Hmm.
the Bible was true, it made sense. Now, it doesn't make sense when you look at reality and compare it to the Bible, right? But
Hmm.
when you're conditioned that the Bible is true your whole life, then you look at it and says, well, if it is true, then Ken Ham is right. But once that crack happened in my, the canonization of New Testament, all of a sudden I was doubting if the Bible was true, and I was allowed myself
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
look at it objectively. Where I wasn't
Hmm.
allowing I'd run from it. I was scared, you know.
And you're right. Yeah, I did that too. I never allowed myself to even once consider that the Bible might be wrong.
Hmm.
And yeah, once it was shown to me that it was wrong, that was the end of all of it. Now, for me, that was a very definable moment. There was a very definable moment when the whole thing just collapsed. Was that now? Before I ask you finish this question, I've starred a number of comments and questions, and I will get to those. There's 2 points I want to get to with the fish first, and then we'll get to the comments and questions. But was there a defining moment, or was it just all just kind of a gradual accumulation of stuff?
I think the like I said, the Wayne Grudem thing allowed me. It scared me,
Hmm.
and that was a defining moment in my life that I later look back on as I started seeing. I don't think it was like if I had to pick a moment, that was a big moment because now I I could see the Bible may not be true. Another one would be with the way the evangelical Trump support reinforced what I was already thinking, that evangelicalism isn't right, because everything that I like, because I was like, we need to have a God fearing president and all this. And then I see them rally around Trump in 2016. I'm like, and I was already on this route of deconstructing. I was already allowing myself to be objective about it. I was like, this is not what we were taught, right? So I think the two big moments in my life, which are surrounded by deconstruction, was the Wayne Grudem thing, and then the embracing of Trump. I mean, the epitome of everything evangelicals despise, but they just totally embraced him like he was God.
Hmm. Hmm. Now, was there a cost for you to deconverting? Did family turn against you? Do all of your family even know that you're an atheist now?
All my family do not know. My wife knows, and my mom knows. My children do not know, and I'm not ready to tell them yet because I don't want them, while they are what I would have considered back in the day liberal Christians. I know that,
Hmm.
if you're a fundamentalist, you know what that means. A liberal Christian just
Yeah.
means a Christian that cares about people, right?
Hmm.
So
I
uh,
was always a liberal Christian.
yeah, see, I was hardcore. I was the one that was horrible. I was a horrible person, but but they would still, I wouldn't want them to know because I don't want them to be worried about my soul, right?
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
I know how they would feel. They would be worried about their dad, and I don't want my kids to worry about me. So they think that I'm just kind of like them, kind of become a liberal Christian. They don't know I've totally lost my faith.
Hmm.
My wife has always been liberal
Hmm.
ever since I've known her. And she lived with me for some god awful reason. I don't know why she put up with me in my worst phase, because I wasn't that bad when we got married, but then I became a fundamentalist like in the middle of our marriage. So I don't know why she stayed with me, but she lived through all that, and she's a spiritual person, but she
Hmm.
understands. It doesn't, she doesn't necessarily believe in hell and everything. So it my relationship with my wife's fine. My mom doesn't understand. Kind of, she's not super fundamentalist, but she's doesn't understand why I don't believe in a God. She thinks, like most people, there has to be something. So it really
Mhm.
hadn't hurt. It hadn't hurt me because I hadn't come completely out with my kids, and I don't think my kids would reject me. I just think my kids would worry about me, and I don't want to put that burden on them because I'm the one who screwed them up, right?
Mhm. 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 It was one of my kids that got me out.
Was it?
Yeah, because what if my kids was told at school that, that evolution didn't happen, and they also made a falsifiable claim, and Robin just very quickly looked it up on the internet, right there in class, and found out they were wrong, and that was it. Robin quit believing, and then eventually brought some of the stuff to me, and um, it was Robin had me watch the Ark protest with Aaron Ra, and as soon as I heard Aaron Ra say, "We know that the flood didn't happen, not just that it couldn't happen, but that it didn't happen," and we
Hmm.
know that from history, biology, geology, mythology, and as soon as he said history, I was like, "But gum, he's right."
Yeah,
There's no 100-year gap in human history,
there is
so
not.
that planet-wide, there were no humans. We can go to a number of different civilizations, and we find the artifacts. I mean, it's all there. And I thought, "How did I not put together that I know that human history has no gap, and, the flood claims that there was a gap in human history. How did I never put that together?" But I didn't.
It Yeah, it's crazy, is that because you're so wrapped up in this, the Bible has to be right, and this is my, me. I think I logically understood that, right? There's no gap in history. Matter of fact, a lot of your written history goes back beyond 6,000 years in some cultures, right? And the Earth's supposed to be 6 to 10,000 years old, but there's some cultures that go back further than that. It's like
Mhm.
I think I logically knew that, but I didn't want to accept it. I figured it. It's like, well, the Bible's right, so it has to be 6 to 10,000 years old. So I justified away, like with everything. Every time uh, a something was presented that disproved evolution or proved evolution, disproved creationism, I would always justify it away with something. It's like, oh well, how do you know, or this or that.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
think it was a cognitive bias where you're purposely. It's the what is it? When you purposely don't want to believe something, but you know it, but you don't want to believe it. So
Mhm,
you
mhm. Yeah, it's
you
cognitive dissonance. It's
yeah,
just trying to live
exactly.
with cognitive dissonance. Yeah.
And it's kind of weird when I look back on it now. I've allowed myself to objectively look at this stuff. I'm kind of embarrassed, and
Mhm.
it's like, how, how did I believe that? And I've spent probably the last couple of years since I've accepted everything, like accepted reality. I've gone back and I've tried to learn about some of this stuff, like the evolution and stuff. I've watched a lot of like PBS eons and stuff on YouTube, and trying to catch myself up because I've spent like 20 years in
Mhm.
this fundamentalist bubble, and I really didn't understand a lot of things, and I've really enjoyed having learned all this stuff I wouldn't allow myself to learn. You know.
Mhm. I'm that way with geology. I was too much of a snob to take geology in high school because the path was, the college-bound kids could take, introductory physical science 2, biology, chemistry, physics. Um, or if you were not college-bound, took introductory physical science, earth science, chemistry, biology, and then usually you didn't take physics. You just didn't take a science. You might not even take the chemistry. But because I wanted the introductory to physical science too, I didn't get the earth science. And so I never had any course in geology at all. And so now I'm trying to take Steve Bowman's course in geology that he just recently published. Paula Gia mentions it, and so I signed up for it, but I took the initial test. I couldn't even pass the initial test to start with lesson 1. So now I'm going through Professor Dave Explains Geology to try to learn enough basic geology that I can take Steve Bowman's course.
Yeah, because we made ourselves so ignorant for decades,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
it's so embarrassing when I think about it. I wish I wasted so much of my life believing fairy tales, and not just. I mean, religion in of itself is not a horrible thing, but fundamentalist Christianity is, and it's because you can see today all the things that all the laws people try to pass and stuff. It's I just wish I hadn't wasted 20 years of my life on that, you know.
Oh gosh, yeah, for me it was 42 years. I really feel like I wasted 42 years of my life.
Yeah, luckily I was just a non-fundamentalist Christian for the first part of my life. It was the middle part that I got fundamentalist. So
Mm. Mm. Okay, I want to go back to a bunch of comments that I've been holding in wait. The first is from the Sinister Porpoise, and he says, "Skeptical fish, savage minnow. Listen, I was the original aquatic name here."
hey, he's not a fish though. He's a mammal.
That's right.
I am the first fish.
um, Mark Caesar wants to know, have you interacted with Godless Engineer? I believe he lives in Alabama too. He does. He lives in Huntsville, which is where I live as well.
Yes, I'm actually I've talked to him on Facebook and stuff before.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay. We need to get together some kind of Alabama atheist group.
that would be pretty cool because there's nothing here. I mean, it's like
I think there's more of us than people realize. I think there's just a lot of people that are afraid to admit that they're atheists because they're afraid of um, what's going to happen if they admit it.
and I think Huntsville might be a little better too because you know Huntsville's like it's in Alabama, but it's not quite as bad.
It is. It's a much more professional city. There's a lot of engineers and there are a lot of doctors here, and it's primarily because of Redstone Arsenal being here. However, Birmingham is actually the most liberal city in the state.
Hmm.
And that's because there's a large Black community in Birmingham, and so there tend to be more Democrats in Birmingham.
And you know Mo Brooks is from Huntsville, right?
Yes, I know. Okay, BS Not Accepted says, "I would like to tell Ray that there's one commandment that I've never broken. I've never boiled a kid in its mother's milk."
Ooh. See, that's another thing, right? Ray Comfort focuses on the Ten Commandments, or you know, and if you know the Bible, the Ten Commandments are given three different ways, and there's three different
Mhm.
sets of Ten Commandments. But what about all the other stuff? And I know the justification. I studied the you know people will say, well, you've got the moral law, and you've got the ceremonial law, and you got you know the way they justify all the other stuff like wearing mixed fabrics and you know, all those other crazy things that's in the Old Testament. They try to justify it away, but in reality, it really isn't any different than the 10 that they focus on, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, one of the things that I like to point out is his question, "How many lies have you told?"
Hmm.
The question asks you to lie to answer it. Because there is no way that any human is going to know everything that they have ever said, whether or not it was true at the time that they said it, and whether or not they knew it was true at the time that they said it. And
Hmm.
because you cannot know those things, no one can give a numerical response to that question and not lie. So
Yep.
the question asks you to lie.
Hmm. And you know, the thing is, in the Bible, I can think of one instance in particular, but lying is looked as good.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I, the prostitute that was in the wall at Jericho that
Rahab.
hid, yep,
Rahab. Yeah.
yep, she
Mhm.
lied to protect them, and that was a good thing, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
lying in even in scripture, lying in of itself is not a bad thing. It's all depending on what you're lying about. If you're helping God, you can lie, you know.
Right.
But if you know, so I
Oh,
always thought that was kind of weird.
did you see the recent video that genetically modified skeptic and his wife put out, talking about how they almost became missionaries?
Yes, I saw that. I saw that.
They were going to lie to patients, to get them into counseling.
Yep. Yep. And you know, a lot of
As long as it's for God, then it's okay.
well, a lot of that Christian ministry is like that, though, isn't it?
Mhm.
Where you go in and you say, "Well, we're gonna." I know a lot of ministers go into like China and stuff to teach English, quote unquote, teach English classes, but they're smuggling Bibles in there, right? So they're
Mhm.
really lying. They're not there to teach English. They're there to prophesize. They're not.
Mhm. Mhm.
You can lie if you can lie for God, but just can't lie for anything else.
Mhm. Spaghettius says it's a good thing to hear that even those who look so extreme can change.
It's
And
true.
mhm. Yep. Give us some facts, and if we're not as Aaron Ra put it up next last week when I had him on, some people are so into their God beliefs that they say, even if you prove to me that I'm wrong, I'm still going to believe it anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
those you cannot change.
everybody I think has. I've heard different stories of deconstruction, and
Hmm.
everybody has a different point that convinces them to start questioning. And like mine was the authority of Scripture, and
Hmm.
it's because you're in that box, like you said.
Hmm.
If this is the perfect inerrant Word of God, and you find out, whoa, wait a minute, even Christians realize there's problems here,
Hmm.
and that opens the door for everything else. And I think that I think for you the worst thing about fundamentalism is when it one crack happens, it just completely falls apart and it's over. You
Hmm.
know.
That was something that was really jarring to me when I was making videos, and I found a video where John Piper admitted that when he went to Germany and he was studying for his doctorate, and he was trying to find the basis for some of the I can't remember if it was the canon or how do we know that these, and his professors were telling him, well, this is probably true and this is probably the way it happened. And he said, we're asking people to base their lives on this, and this is all
Mhm.
just guesswork. How can we ask people to dedicate themselves to guesswork? And I thought, wow,
Exactly.
this is a fantastic question. I can't wait to hear what the answer is. And he doesn't answer the question. He changes the subject at that point and starts talking about something different.
Cognitive dissonance.
Exactly, exactly. He cannot face the question that even he knows is insurmountable.
Well, the question is, there's so much on the line, right? If the Bible is
Mhm.
true, an eternity in hell is horrible, horrible thing. So if God were to actually, I mean, you can debate all day whether he set Adam and Eve up in the narrative or not, but if this Bible has the truth to save you from that eternity in hell, shouldn't it be like obvious and perfect, really, and
Mhm.
not have any
Mhm.
errors for real?
Right.
Or I mean, if you give anybody the ability to question or doubt it, and they go to hell, be like, "Oh, see, I tricked you. God tricked you. I made it look not perfect, so you could go to hell." That just
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That just makes no sense. The Spaghettius says, you're not a moron. You just looked like one. If you really were a moron, then you would not have made it out.
well, I appreciate that. I, we all sometimes do things we think back and they're not even religion related. It's like, man, that was stupid. Why did I do that? Especially teenage years, man, that was really, really dumb. But it's a learning process, right? If we ever quit learning, then what's the use to life? You should always be learning and wanting to know something new and to better yourself.
Mhm. Mhm. Mark Caesar asks, was it a relief to finally say that you don't believe anymore?
It was. And you know what? It was like a burden released because you have a lot of this struggle, internal struggle, and about all this sin in your life because according to the Bible, I don't believe in sin anymore, but according to the Bible, there's all this sin in your life, and there's all this uh, you feel bad about things you've done in life and everything. And then once you realize and you admit that it's not real, it's like I can live my life the way I want to now. I
Mhm.
can do what I want to. I don't have to do that. I don't have to hate people anymore because one of the things with big in fundamentalism is, being homophobic, right? And
Mhm.
I didn't like that, right? I
Mhm.
didn't want to be, and I really wasn't to the degree that a lot of people were. But
Mhm.
I was like, well, I don't want these people to go to hell. I really honestly, because I believed it, I thought they were going to go to hell, and I honestly didn't want them to go to hell. So I didn't hate them, but now I can accept them, and I can join in. I can like go to parties with them and be friends with them and all this stuff that fundamentalism wouldn't allow me to do before. And it's like and it's like that with many things. It's like now I don't have to hate certain groups, and I didn't necessarily hate, but dislike or not associate with, because you're not supposed to associate with sinners either, right? So
Right.
even if you didn't hate them, you couldn't hang out with them. But
Mhm.
now I can openly hang out with people and not have to judge them and not have,
Mhm.
it was a huge relief in life. Life is better, honestly, than
Oh,
when I was
yeah.
religious.
No question. No question. Okay, this is a comment that I'm going to go ahead and handle myself, but I'll let you chime in as well. Harmonica Man says, one of my cousins said he didn't know what he believes, but he's not ready to handle nothingness forever ever after death. And my response to that is, believers tell us that Jesus lives in their heart. And in a way, they're correct because Jesus is dead. We know that Jesus isn't here, but because they remember him, he lives on in their hearts. And I think we do that with each other as well. My mother died 10 years ago, but she lives on in my heart and in my memories. And I don't think anyone really dies as long as we keep their memories alive. And that's something that I appreciate from a number of Asian cultures where they honor their ancestors and they remember their ancestors, or the Mexican, Dios de Mortem, the Day of the Dead, where they honor their dead and they talk about their ancestors, and I think that keeps us from going into nothingness. That we keep our ancestors alive forever in our hearts.
Hmm.
Did you want to comment on that as well?
Well, yeah, and as far as like handling nothingness forever after death, we were nothingness before we were born, and we don't remember that, right?
Hmm.
So, I mean, we won't know when we become nothingness. But
Right.
I guess it's more like the legacy, right? Everybody wants to leave a legacy behind,
Hmm.
and like you said, as long as you live in the hearts and minds of the family members you left behind, you'll still exist.
Hmm. BS not accepted says, "Were you there?" can be thrown right back at Ham. Well, yeah, I've done that myself. And isn't there a hymn where there was the "Were you there when they crucified my Lord?" Yep, I know that hymn. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? I'm sure you know that
Oh,
one too, don't you?
will you inquire?
Oh yeah. Hmm.
Ah,
But I am not a lead singer. I am a support singer.
I couldn't sing worth a lick. I was in like the orchestra in church. I played tuba.
I can go off key very easily if I don't have someone with me to help me stay on key.
I'm off key
Dan
all the time.
Dan D says, as a JW, hell wasn't taught, but Armageddon was real. That's an
Mm,
interesting perspective. It also brings up the fact that, believers don't believe the same things. If
yep.
you talk to a dozen Christians, you're going to get a dozen different answers as to how a person is saved, why they need to be saved, where they're going to go. What is hell? Does hell even exist?
But
And
Granny, they're
so,
not real Christians. They're Jehovah Witnesses.
okay, now I'm caught up with the old comments. Now I have to get to the ones that came in um, since I started looking at the started comments. Okay, Sinister Porpoise says, I am a she. My apologies, Sinister Porpoise.
Oh, I apologize.
Uh,
I got a friend at work. This is real quick, talking about pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
You know how it is in Alabama. Everybody gets all upset about pronouns. And when we get emails in from somebody that, the more progressive states and stuff, people will be sending their pronouns in their signature block. Oh, he drives him nuts. He's like, they put their pronouns in there. Like, oh my God, are their pronouns going to hurt you? You know, I said, look, man, like, how many times have you got an email from somebody with a name like Kim or, something, and it actually be a male, but you didn't know that, and you respond with she, and actually it was a he. And I said, hey, I think we should put pronouns in even before. Pronouns should have been in emails anyway. But he
Mm-hmm.
like freaks out. He goes nuts. I'm like, well, what are your pronouns? Are you a she, her, or a he, him? And then he got all mad. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing is, I don't know why that freaks people out. The conservative people, they just go nuts.
Mm-hmm. Spaghettius says, what I try to remember is that religious fundamentalists are not only the ones that can stumble into over cognitive dissonance. It can happen to us too. It's just different topics.
It's true. That's
Mm-hmm.
true.
Mm-hmm.
The term skeptical means you should be skeptical of most things, not fall into another belief system. That's why, like, I consider myself the an agnostic atheist. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people use that term, right? Because I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if there's a God or not. There may be an invisible God. There may be a deist God. But
Mm-hmm.
I know there's not a Christian God. So, and I know that of what I've seen, I've seen no evidence of all these other religions of gods. So, I don't, I'm not convinced there's a God, but there may be one out there. And I have to remind myself of that sometimes too. It's like, well, could there be? There's a possibility. I doubt it, but it's possible. And you don't want to get in a dogmatic position either way, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nevermore says the Jehovah Witnesses giving their Bible to compare against the Catholic Bible. I ended up questioning both.
Hey, I was taught how to witness the Jehovah Witnesses.
Oh
Basically,
yeah, I was too. Mm-hmm.
the first chapter of John, where they
Mm-hmm.
say in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was a God, because
Mm-hmm.
they don't believe Jesus is divine. They don't believe
Mm-hmm.
he's God. So they put the letter A in there, a God, and then you ask them,
Mm-hmm.
how many gods do you believe in? Evidently, you believe in more than one because you said a God. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just their way of trying to justify their theology versus what the manuscripts actually say, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which is why it's kind of fun to bring two different, Christians that are from two different perspectives together and let them argue over theology. And just, if there really is a God that cares about what you believe, don't you think that God would clarify that?
Well, he kind of sucks, don't he? If this
Mm-hmm.
Christian God, because there's so many denominations and so many different. It's like, well, who's right? I mean, you got 20 different types of Baptists, right?
Mark Caesar says, when I sing, I can start riots. Harmonica Man says, I can sing the blues. I believe that. You've
Well,
you've
with a
had a
name like
tough life.
Harmonica Man, you better be able to sing the blues.
Mm-hmm. Aunt Jer says, when I sing, people get pregnant.
Well, probably don't need to be singing a lot then.
Nevermore says, I sing like a bird.
I wish I could sing.
Mhm. Okay, there are a few more comments, but we are out of time, and so I do want to respect people's time, and I do want to keep these a little bit shorter. But if you'd like to have the skeptical fish on again, send me a note, and I will definitely ask him to come back because I think you've got more to say, don't you, Mr. Fish?
Oh, I've always got more to say.
Okay,
You can't
okay.
shut me up sometimes.
As soon as I called you Mr. Fish, that reminded me, there was a guy in my high school. His name was Jim Fish, and he was the star of our football team. And I've looked for him once in a while, but I can't find him, especially because a name as common as Fish. And now I'm
Hmm.
going, Mr. Fish. Oh, you could be Jim Fish from my high school.
I'm not Jim Fish.
Okay. Before we go, just a couple of little things. Mr. Fish, would you like to shill for anything? Is there anything that you would like to plug or you'd like people to look for to come to?
Not really, because I
Okay.
don't do a stream. I don't. All I do is troll my Twitter account, so I'm not famous. I'm just kind of a troll that lurks in the back. So I don't have anything I'm trying to push. I just like having fun and talking about this stuff.
Okay. Okay. What I have coming up, the scripted video that's coming out Tuesday is a review of Dale Partridge's. Uh, he has a new book called The Manliness of Christ. And I review an interview that he did over his book. And next week, it's not firm, but I might have Viced Rhino on. He gave me a
Ooh.
maybe, and if he is not here next week, he definitely will be here another week. I asked him if he can't come next week, maybe April 1st. That could be fun having him on for April
Ooh, April
Fool's Day.
Fool's Day.
Mhm.
Hey, you know what Ray Comfort says? That's the national atheist holiday
Right,
because a fool
right,
says in his heart there is no God.
right, right. And in 2 weeks, Ring will be on. So
Nice.
come here to watch Ring. Okay, and with that, thank you everyone for coming. It has been a pleasure having all of you, and thank you so much for coming and talking to us, Skeptical Fish. This has been a lot of fun.
Well, thank you, and thank everybody for showing up and listening to me ramble on and on and on about myself. I love talking about myself.
And I especially appreciate Mark Caesar's fish jokes.
Oh yes, the dad jokes, they were wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Oh, he's got one more for us.
Uh
Shill
oh.
or shell?
Thou shall not do something.
Okay. Everyone, live your life.
Thank you.